All righty, well, TGIF, happy Friday, everyone. David Shepard here with Phil Hamilton for our weekend review. I had 3 columns up this week, so that's a goal of mine, and I have been falling down on the job recently, but I got 3 up this week,
Good,
which was
yeah.
good. I won't necessarily rehash them, but I had a Jill Biden column yesterday on her book tour, and she thought Joe was having a stroke, and there's a lot of angles to take on that, and we won't dwell on it. But the one thing I would point out that even though she thought he was having a stroke, she then did not cancel the after debate plan, which was to go to the Waffle House. I forgot where the Waffle House was, but anyway, in honor of them, I've got my Waffle House T-shirt on, and I have to agree. Even if you think you might have had a stroke a few hours earlier, if you're feeling fine, go to the Waffle House. You'll feel
Yeah.
even better. I'm just joking. I commented on that. We won't have to rehash that unless you have anything to add
It's
to
just
that.
so I think my husband's having a stroke. And after I think he's having a stroke, we're going to do this little dog and pony show, I guess, in the press room after that and say, Joe, you answered all the questions. And then you're still
Yeah.
so concerned that you're going to go, as you stated, to the Waffle House. Look, from my perspective, I don't know the woman, but just from her actions, I think she enjoyed him being president more than he enjoyed being president, because she liked to fly on the nice airplanes and ride in the nice car and get all the perks that come with being the first lady. Quite frankly, I think she has abused Joe Biden.
Yeah, I agree. I
That's
think
my
it's
opinion, and I'm sticking to it. Nobody should treat someone who was obviously in that condition the way that she treated him.
the thought I think a lot of people have is that he really wanted to be president, and she's being the supportive wife. But like you said, I think maybe it's really the other way around. He's supportive to her because this is what she wants, maybe. Or, I mean, I'm sure he wants to be president and all, but I think it's one of those things that he has to be reminded of. Joe, you really wanted to be president. You want to be president. We got to run again. You're the only one that can beat
Yeah.
Trump. So I think she's the one kind of pushing him. And that was a weird sort of interview. And in the article, I just theorized that the stroke line does a couple things. Number one, when you have a memoir out, you want to tease it in some ways to get people to buy it. Because the problem with a lot of these political memoirs are they're so sanitized. And people don't really want to read the sanitized memoir. You got to sprinkle in something there that's a little bit salacious. And I think that's what she did. The second thing about the stroke claim is that it's a way of saying that this was so out of the ordinary. I'd never seen Joe trail off or mix up his words. I'd never seen it. So it was so out of the ordinary. I thought he was having a stroke. Give cover. So I never thought that much of her. And and I kind of had fun with the whole Dr. Jill notion. I thought, she's a doctor, thought he was having a stroke. But I think later, didn't she say it was a cold?
Well, then she thought he was drugged because of the cold. She thought he might have been drugged with cold medications.
But I concluded my column with the claim that I think from now on, we shouldn't have to refer to her as Dr. Jill Biden.
How true.
Plus, if you thought someone was having a stroke and you didn't do anything about it, you'd lose your medical license. Of course, she has no medical license. The other thing is, what was the old joke? She's a doctor like Dr. J.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I had a column on and I don't know if we discussed this, the DNC autopsy. I did try over the weekend to read through it, but it was so difficult I gave up. It was really, I think a lot of it was AI generated, and it was so full of mistakes.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
It was basically worthless. And then the last one I did would have been on, the Paxton Cornyn Tuesday. I theorized in my column that Trump saw the writing on the wall. He knew Paxton was going to win anyway, so he figured he might as well just endorse him. I think that's probably.
And if that was the case, it just expanded the margin.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And there are those that say that you can look at same day vote and you can kind of see, it kind of gives you an idea in the early vote. So I'll get your thoughts on this in a second. Mine were that I think this was kind of a mistake on our part. I think we could have kept Cornyn. Cornyn hasn't been doing anything to block the Trump agenda. Although it is true that I think Paxton is more MAGA. It probably would have been wiser to save the campaign money, keep Cornyn. He's just probably going to make it for one more term. And then that guarantees us the Senate, because it would be harder to defeat an incumbent senator. So it'd be harder to knock off Cornyn. as it stands, I mean, I think Paxton can win, but Paxton will have a lot of baggage too.
Well,
and the only thing,
the thing about Paxton and his baggage, the guy's won 3 statewide elections, and one of them was after all the baggage was exposed. You know, the one thing I do agree with, I think it's going to take a whole lot more money to get Paxton over the finish line than it would have Cornyn. And in a year when things are so up in the air, you hate to have to dedicate as much money as I'm hearing them talking about, $200 million, you know, to hold on to an incumbent seat. And John Cornyn, I mean, he wasn't a rebel rouser. He wasn't a Thomas Massey. And it could have well been that the die had already been cast, and Trump saw that and said, hey, I'm going to keep my record clean.
The thing is, Cornyn was more of your centrist sort of Republican, but he's voted for the Trump agenda. In other words, he's not a Tom Massey. So we get that. And that's true. It's nothing like Massey. But it's going to cost a lot of money. Now, the question is, will Democrats sink a lot into this? Do they really think that Tallarico's got a legitimate shot? That'll be interesting to see how much money they pump into it. And Tallarico, and this I think is smart by Paxton, already hit him hard and hit him early. This way, maybe that scares off national Democrat donors. Maybe they feel, hey, we're throwing money away by trying to get Tallarico elected, which is something that doesn't usually happen in Texas statewide. But Tallarico still looks pretty decent in the polls, which is a surprise to me. But I think it's one of those things that people don't know that much about him yet, and he was nominated a while back. So I think people need to be reminded of his views of.
And I think Paxton will be much more aggressive than Cornyn would have been. Cornyn would have pointed the things out, but it wouldn't have been with the same fire and intensity that I think Paxton will bring to it. You know, it'll be an interesting race, and I'm like you. I mean, the more I hear about this Tallarico guy, he's a piece of work.
He's got kind of a Joel Osteen-like quality about him. I don't know what it is, whether it's kind of oddly svelte, the build, or whether it's the angel-like voice or the hair with no part. But there's something about him that's sort of odd. I don't know what it is. And he also looks like a kid. They say one of the podcasters describes him as Richie Cunningham, like a Richie
Happy
Cunningham. Remember the old Happy Days? Yeah. I don't know, but and Trump calls him Alfred E. Newman. Because he looks like Alfred E. Newman. Alfred E. Newman. Yeah, for us to admit that, it kind of dates ourselves, you know.
Required reading when I was growing up.
I just remember seeing that. For younger viewers, Google him, Alfred E. Newman, the way the character looked. But Tallarico, I think so many ways he's just out of step with Texas. He was, you know, his anti-meat campaign, God is non-binary. All these, there's 6 genders apparently. So he's just a real freak. They call him Tallarico, or low T Tallarico.
He's spending a lot of time backtracking a lot of those past comments, but you know what? That's his record. And you can't run from your record.
It's just hard to be. Someone was saying that even if he was in Wisconsin, it might be tough to get along with those views. So we'll see. It's just going to be a lot of money. And like you said, my concern is that we need to save our money for North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan, Maine. But we'll see. And then do you have any concerns? And I throw this out here. I just thought about it. In the case of Maine, they have Susie Collins slightly behind, but I have been told that last time she was behind and she won by pretty good margins.
My only concern with Susan Collins is, when have you stayed too long? I do think she's well respected in Maine, and I think she is probably the only Republican right now that could win in Maine. But she's been there a while, and sometimes you get that anti-incumbent who's been there a long, long time. And so that would be my only concern. I understand that she sometimes doesn't vote the way Trump would like for her to vote, but Trump understands that she has to do that to be able to vote with him 90% of the time. And she never makes a big hoopla about, she cast her vote and it's a no vote for something Trump might want. She's not out there beating the drums and, doing all that stuff, trying to draw attention to herself, as Thomas Massey used to always do. So I think Susan Collins, because of her record, it's not the first time she's been behind. If you know, that doesn't surprise me. I think in the end, it'll come to voter turnout, and I think Plattner. I mean, Plattner's got a record that I wouldn't want to have to defend. I wouldn't want to have to run, defending the Nazi tattoo that I, put on my chest, and some of the comments that he's made. Again, they're public. You say all you want, you're going to be held accountable for the things that you've said. And if you try to change what you've said, well, then you're a flip-flopper. And if you're a flip-flopper, why do we need you? Susan Collins has been pretty daggone consistent, whether you like her consistency or not.
I agree. And, my view on is that I have higher expectations. If you're from a red state, I expect you to be the solid conservative. If you're Susie Collins in Maine, which isn't a red state, then I say give her more of a pass. My problem was with, say, McCain in Arizona. We could have a conservative there. Lindsey Graham, when he started getting a little squishy in South Carolina. Mitt Romney in Utah, one of the most conservative states in the union. And I kept thinking, why the hell we got Mitt Romney? But we do need Susie Collins. I cut Murkowski a little slack, but not quite the slack I would cut for Collins, because Alaska's still so pretty red state. So, but we'll see, and that'll be a tough race there too. We'll see. But by the way, speaking of races, and I have felt bad because the last few weeks we have not talked about this. It hasn't really been on my radar so much because LA is so liberal, but Spencer Pratt is a former reality star. I never saw him on the reality show, but I have a friend that did. Pratt, new poll out. It's pretty close for Spencer Pratt there. He's run a very good campaign, but what do you think of Spencer Pratt? Does he have a shot?
I think he does have a shot. And what I like about Spencer Pratt is he says, I'm going to win over 50%. I mean, that takes a lot of bravado. And the third candidate in the race is not going to be taking any votes away from Spencer Pratt. So if that person gets 3 or 4% of the vote, that could really impact a Bass. And what Pratt has to try to do is get 50 plus 1 and have, after it's certified, still be at 50 plus 1. Because in essence, the way the California system works, if you get 50% in the runoff, you in essence are the mayor. Because there's no mayors in November. Now, Bass may serve out the term until the normal inauguration date, which is usually timed for mayors like January 1st. But in essence, that would give him, that'd be a beautiful thing if he had that much time to put things together, because he's never been an elected official before. Put things together, make sure he's got a good, strong team around him. And then it gives him a wonderful platform, because if she is still the mayor and continues to do loony things, then he could just, from the sidelines, be throwing hand grenades as the next mayor of Los Angeles.
Well, I think he's got a shot. I do. The poll has it pretty close, but a lot of undecided voters. But I think if we ever have a year, this should be it. Bass.
Well, if the polls are close, then it probably means that Pratt has got a big lead, because you're going to find a lot of people that are not going to be straight with the pollsters. I think if you're for Pratt, you don't have a problem saying it. I think if you're for Bass, you might not be so braggadocious about it. And there might be a lot of, well, I haven't decided yet. And I know there's a pretty significant undecided vote still hanging out there. I think those undecided votes are going for Pratt. They just don't want to say it.
Yeah, you may be right. There may be a hidden Pratt vote there. Ironically, I was reading the other night, I have a book of one of my favorite political writers, H.L. Mencken, wrote it's got a collection of his columns. And he didn't publish it, but sometime after his death, someone cobbled it together. Anyway, he wrote about the L.A. mayor's race because it was one of the reforms back in, I guess it was the Hiram Johnson days. And that is, they decided to try to take the politics or the parties out of a lot of these races. And that's why they have the jungle primary. You can be a Republican, you can be a Democrat, you all run together. And that's what we're dealing with here, because officially I think this is a nonpartisan race.
There's nothing. They call it a nonpartisan race, but everybody knows who everybody is.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and you've got someone running to the left of Bass, and that is that socialist city
That's
council
right.
member.
Really far, far, far left. And if that
Yeah.
becomes 3 or 4%, that could be significant in a close election.
Yeah, it's interesting. If LA, if you reelect this person though,
Oh yeah.
there's no excuse for you. And then also, if you want, we can stay in California briefly because we've got the governor's race and Steve Hilton's hanging on. Let's hope he makes it to the runoff. We need him to at least get to the runoff to have a shot. But it just seems to me that the field is so weak. You got Katie Porter, the lady who's a physically abusive, actually, person. You've got Steyer, who's a guy who just tries to buy an office, clearly. They got Swalwell out, and you got Becerra.
Who was terrible. He was terrible secretary.
Yeah, Biden called him Xavier Baccaria. Yeah. I think for Democrats, it's just such an unpalatable choice for governor and for mayor. I mean, even the rank and file Democrat in L.A. can't be happy with Karen Bass.
No.
But we'll see what happens. But I do think that's right. Yeah. And she was out. Where was she? Remember when the fire started?
In one of the African countries visiting somebody that I think was either getting inaugurated or having a party or something.
Maybe it was an inauguration. But why would the mayor of an American city be at an inauguration in a foreign country? It just made no sense to me. I guess it was just a junket on the taxpayers' dime. But, well, hopefully we get a shot at the governor's race as well. I think Steve Hilton would be great and get him in the debate. In fact, I've got here somewhere Steve Hilton's book. Here, I've got it. Cal of Failure. So a buddy of mine loaned this to me, so I'll definitely read it. Well, and as we went on the air, apparently there's a potential deal, and Trump, as we started here today, hasn't ruled on it. So
apparently the big news was that he was in the Situation Room, and he had some of his advisors around him, and he didn't say when he would make a decision. But Trump has a way of knowing how to stay in the news, and so they were talking about the stock market. Apparently closed at over 51,000 today on the possibility of good news. Trump is a pragmatic person, and he also, I think, is a tough negotiator, and he's negotiating not for himself, he's negotiating for the United States. And I think he's going to make sure that he doesn't send pallets of cash, whether it's unfrozen asset cash or not, to a country so that they can accelerate their nuclear weapons program. I think he's drawn the line on about 3 specific things that are non-negotiable as far as he's concerned. And for each day it goes on, we see gas prices coming down. I paid the lowest gas for gasoline that I've paid in a while at $4.25 today, and I think if he can get some type of deal where the Strait of Hormuz opens up, then I think gas prices are going to do exactly what he said they were going to do. They're going to tumble down, not tumble down as fast as they went up, but they're going to come down pretty quickly. I think the key is to get the enrichment. We got to try to unearth that as much as we can to get the enriched uranium. In terms of whether Iran announces they'll forswear a nuclear weapon, whether they do or not, I don't know that they're believable. But for me, I just think the one thing that most necessary would be to get the enrichment out of their hands. And I think that's one of the 3 or 4 things that Trump has said are non-negotiable. I know the Strait is one. I know the enrichment is one. I think the ballistic missiles are one. And maybe those were the 3 that we're not going to negotiate about that. And then the other thing is, I guess let's get back to Virginia. A couple things there, I'll say, and then I'll turn it over to you. One story I haven't really looked into that much, but Abigail Spanberger apparently fired the rector at University of Virginia Tech. I don't know exactly why, but there's thought that it may be the fact that he had contributed to Winsome Sears had something to do with it. I don't know. I'll look into that one. And we still have no budget. And what I'm wondering, and I want to get your expertise on this, is
is this sort of a power move against Spanberger that the longer this goes, and the longer we get to the edge, which is the end of June, then maybe it's sort of some leverage that Louise Lucas, Don Scott, and the Democrats who control the General Assembly can get over her. And then if it could be a tactic on their part for the delay. But I don't know if you have to comment on any of those two Spanberger things.
The thing about the rector, I mean, I think governors have a lot of discretion as to who they want for those types of positions. But what I understand is that it was not as much the firing as it was the letter in which she wrote, where she made some pretty strong accusations about malfeasance. And
Yes.
and so if you're going to accuse somebody of malfeasance, you ought to at least say what the malfeasance was about.
Yeah.
And apparently the letter is just a strong accusatory letter about unsavory things, and yet none of them were identified. So that's what bothers me more than anything else, is you're going to accuse somebody of something and you don't have the backbone to back it up. To me, that's just not human decency. If you think the man has done something that qualifies as malfeasance, which is, could bring criminal charges, then you ought to say what it is.
Yeah.
And if you can't say what it is, then you shouldn't have said it. So, that's my perspective there, because, appointments on boards and commissions and rectors and this, that, and the other, that has become such a political hot potato now. It's whoever's in office wants to get rid of everybody that doesn't bow down and, praise them every second of every day. But making accusations as your rationale for doing it, and unsubstantiated other than your words that he did it, and without saying what they were. I mean, this is somebody that graduated from Virginia Tech, has been a loyal supporter of Virginia Tech for 60 years, and you're going to come up with this? That's just not the way you treat people. The other thing about the budget is interesting. One of the things that I think Spanberger did this week, that I don't know how much attention it really garnered, but I found it, where she had indicated that she did not, or would not look kindly upon them trying to put some of their legislative initiatives that she has vetoed in the budget. She basically said that's really inappropriate to do that. Now, I would say it is inappropriate to do it after a piece of legislation has been vetoed. But that wouldn't surprise me if they tried to do that. I think it was last week or the week before that I suggested that might be something the Democrats are doing, particularly with collective bargaining and the retail sales of marijuana. And it wouldn't surprise me about the casino in Tyson's Corner. Those are kind of the three that kind of stick out, primarily because of the players involved. But she came down pretty hard that would not be appropriate, to do something like that. Which then says, if they do it, have they pulled what you initially suggested, a power play? Yeah. You're daggone right they have. And it's one of these things, we talked about it. Look, you're here for 4 years, we're here forever. And meaning the General Assembly is going to be there forever. And so I think it clearly is, because I don't know of a time that Virginia has not passed its budget by deadline. And not the legislative deadline, but the fiscal year deadline. And to have that as your legacy in your first year, that you were unable, with a strong majority in the House and a majority, not a strong majority, but a majority in the Senate, that you couldn't bring the players together to work out a compromise long before, where are we, May 29th?
Yeah.
That talks about leadership and the lack of leadership. And people can say, well, this is her first year. She doesn't know how Richmond works, this, that, and the other. Look, you ought to know that the budget fiscal year ends on June 30th. You ought to know that it takes a couple of weeks to put the whole thing together after it's finally agreed upon. The session ended 75, 78, somewhere between their days ago. And we still don't even have conversations going on, public conversations going on. They may be on the phone all the day, Scott and Louise Lucas talking about how they want to try to resolve this thing. But there's been no public movement on it. And I do think that there's some of this, showmanship for attention and a demonstration of who's really in charge here. And it would be a huge embarrassment to the governor, any governor, to have their own political party be the result of, even if it's a 1 second shutdown.
The other issue would be the bond rating, Virginia's bond.
Absolutely. Oh, there's a lot of repercussions. Look, school boards still don't know what their school budgets are going to be. What money are we going to get from the state? We have a ballpark figure because they all know what their composite index is. But until that happens, I mean, the ramifications are just unbelievable, because you've got governing bodies out there, the school boards, that don't know what state money they're really going to get until the budget is done. And so that localities in some cases are in somewhat of a pickle too. The bond rating, as you mentioned, it's nothing positive comes out of missing the deadline in Virginia. That's for sure.
Yeah, and then it makes them look like the gang that can't shoot straight. And this is why I think ultimately they reach a deal, because they've got total power. And if they end up failing to get a budget done on time, that's got to be bad politically for them. And people say, why should we vote for Democrats? You can't, you can complain, but you can't govern. I just don't think she's really up to the job. She has no executive experience. She was in Washington, so she doesn't really understand Richmond, and she didn't come out of the legislature. Maybe she'll get the hang of it, but no, I don't think that much of her. And then the firing of the guy in Virginia Tech, maybe it was for legitimate reasons, but she's the one who campaigned on, I want to keep. She complained Youngkin was getting involved with all these universities, and she said they had to maintain their independence. Now she fires the rector who happened to give money to Sears. I don't know, maybe there's a legitimate reason to fire him, but as you pointed out, the letter, she didn't really spell out why. Well, we'll see what happens there. Let's do winners and losers of the week. Do you have a winner? Or if you want, I'll go first.
Yeah, go first.
I think my winner is in Kentucky. The people, the 4th District, they got rid of Tom Massie. The thing about Massie, and I've known people like this all my life, these purists, usually libertarian types, who they're not there really to govern. They're there to virtue signal. They're there to say, I never voted for a deficit. I never voted for a regulation. They're doing that because it's about them. It's not really about serving the people of Kentucky. And people say, well, wouldn't it be great, if everybody voted like Massie? No, because I'd like a balanced budget too. But here's the thing. If you did that overnight, you cut off all those people on government assistance and aid, you'd sink us into a depression. But Massie understands that, hey, most of my colleagues are reasonable, so I can smear them, I can be the purist, and it's just very self-indulgent of Massie. So I didn't think much of him at all. And then he had the quote-unquote concession speech where he accused his opponent of basically being an agent of a foreign country.
Yeah.
I had never heard anything like that. And then people say, well, AIPAC, they spent a lot of money to get rid of Massie. Well, of course, Massie's the only vote against a bill condemning anti-Semitism, a resolution. And he had to have known, if I vote against it, they're going to come after me. So you got to know that. So I don't buy this whining about Tel Aviv went after them, which isn't true. It's American citizens that campaign, that are favorable to Israel, but they're the ones that campaign. They're the ones that pump money into it. So that's my winner of the week. But the people of Kentucky now will have someone, they'll send someone to Washington who will matter, whose vote will count. The problem for a Massie is if you go to Washington and say, well, I'm going to vote no on everything, well, what can you extract? What can you get? Because they know, oh, well, this person's a no vote, so we can ignore it. So no, I was no fan of Massie's.
Ask yourself, what did Massie accomplish for the citizens of Kentucky?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think his no vote reflects what he was able to do for the people he was elected to represent. Nothing.
Yeah, that's right.
If you vote for nothing, you get nothing.
That's right.
And so yeah, I mean, Massey clearly was, and I guess as for at least the short term, Ken Paxton was the winner. He was the winner of the week for me. It was an expensive primary campaign, the initial and then the runoff. It was money that I wish they had resolved this before, amongst themselves, one way or the other. I mean, when you look at the results, it's almost as if, John, why don't you just go out and just say you're not going to participate? You didn't win the 50% in the general primary. And it didn't help that Wesley Hunt endorsed Paxton. So a lot of the Wesley Hunt voters, I'm sure, went with Ken Paxton. But it was an election. He won overwhelmingly. So he's the winner. But I'll throw a little nugget towards John Cornyn in that he was very classy in his concession speech. And he said, I will support the nominees of this party. So he came out and said, so yes, Ken Paxton was the big winner. I think John Cornyn showed the class of an individual that he is by addressing the crowd the way he did and making the statement that he would support the party's nominees. I'm sure it was a tough, bitter defeat, but he'd been there 30 years, so maybe he'd kind of steeled himself to that possibility anyway. So both of them, but Paxton was the big winner from my perspective.
Yeah, Paxton, and I agree with everything you said. Paxton, Cornyn was a real gentleman, really class act unlike a Massey. But it reminds me a little about another Texan named Ralph Hall. I don't know if you remember Ralph Hall. He was a longtime Democrat congressman, one of the old boll weevils. He was a very conservative Democrat, just the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. But he stayed a Democrat, and despite his conservative record, they eventually defeated him. But he reminded me of Cornyn in really a class act, and I almost felt sorry to see him lose because.
Well, I mean, classy guys are tough to come by. And when you see it, you really recognize it.
You remember the old baseball manager, Leo Durocher.
Oh, yeah. Nice guys finish last.
Yeah, he wrote a book called Nice Guys Finish Last. When I was a little boy, my brother, we were just little kids, and Durocher was in Tyson's, did a book signing, and my father took us up, and there's a picture of my brother. I was a little kid. My brother talking to Durocher as Durocher was signing the book to him. The last thing I'll say about Leo Durocher is that as a manager, he was fierce and all. But I've seen Leo Durocher in these interviews on YouTube, and he seems like the nicest guy, Leo Durocher. So my loser of the week would be Jill Biden because, Jill came across as just a horrible wife. I mean, I thought he was having a heart attack, but after the debate, he seemed fine. So I said, let's go to Waffle House, because you seem fine. Let's go. Put herself in a really bad light. And maybe it helps with book sales, and I've had a couple books. I don't think there's certain things I wouldn't want to do. You can always get notoriety, but you still have to think about your reputation or your image. And I guess she figures, there's not going to be another race, so she can go out this way. But I think she'd have to be my loser of the week.
Well, there may not be another race for Joe Biden, but there's going to be a lot of races for Democrats. And I think the last thing they want is Joe Biden going around on a book tour talking about the condition her husband was in and trying to say, I've never seen it before and I've never seen it since, when everybody saw it that night.
Yeah, that's right.
And the media had been covering it up for almost 4 years. And it finally got exposed, and she's trying to sit on both sides of the fence. Never saw it before, never saw it since. So I'm sitting on that fence. Well, I've always heard the statement: if you sit on the fence, you get splinters on both sides.
Yeah,
and I think that's what she's done. But now let me give you my loser of the week, and this is going to be another twist too.
Yeah.
My loser of the week, and I was glad it was a loser of the week, Al Green.
Oh yes,
Al Green, screaming Al Green, waving that cane. I mean, to me. He's he's a loser of the week because of all the people that might have lost, other than Thomas Massey, he deserved it more than anybody. So I was glad that he lost, but I think it's a win for decorum and the way he always handled himself. It was always a little cheesy, standing there having to be escorted out. So I think him being my loser of the week is a real benefit to the country.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's kind of a backwards way of looking at it, because I was kind of fixated on Texas this week. And but I did. Well, I love the fact that he got clobbered too. He was in the 30s, and the victor was in the 60s. So couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
That's right. And speaking of Texas, you had that other Democrat that was talking about
concentration
camp, for Zionists, and
and
she was a real whack job. Well, Democrats dodged a bullet in her losing, but I still think, even with defeating her, which they're happy about, they still got the Graham Plattners and the Talricos. They still got some nut jobs.
Yeah.
I'll leave with this. When I was young, I prided myself on knowing, you name the state, I could tell you the two senators. Yeah. Today, I don't really have that ability, so I went through the list just to remind me who are the senators from all the states. Few of the names I had never heard of.
I know.
And in New Jersey, there's the senator's Andy Kim. He's the other senator.
Yeah.
I guess he took Menendez's seat, so it's Booker. And,
right.
You know what Andy Kim's claim to fame is? After January 6th, he showed up at the Capitol, and they have a photo of him with a bag collecting trash. He's in a suit. And that suit, they've donated to the Smithsonian, so if you want to see that suit. So he was an obscure figure. And then Delaware's senator who took over for Carper, and I'd never heard of this woman, Lisa Blunt in Rochester. So I don't know. Those are the two senators that I'm like, I never heard of them. But with Delaware, you never know what kind of nut job that they're going to, what kind of empty suit they'll elect. Well, Phil, I'm going to look more into the rector situation in Virginia Tech and try to get something on that. But the good news about Spanberger is, which is bad news for Virginia, but it gives us lots to talk about. And also it shows there'll be a lot of opportunities for her to be the hypocrite. So on one hand, she wants to keep politics out of the universities, but on the other hand, she'll fire some conservatives.
Also the hypocrite on collective bargaining. And I can tell you, the union people down here in Newport News are livid. And these are private sector union people that are livid that their brother public sector employees won't be able to get the benefits of unionization that the taxpayers will pay for. But that one was a big one.
Well, and it's so obvious. I was talking to a friend the other day who was asking about this, and she clearly wants to delay this because she knows it'll be bad for the state. She knows it'll be expensive. She knows that it'll ruin any idea of affordability. So it's obvious. I mean, she wants to put it off because she knows it's bad. Well, Phil, have a great rest of the week, a great weekend. Hopefully it'll be a nice one in Newport News.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful day today.
It was that.
Here in Nova. And I'm going to try to do another column this weekend. So I did 3 this week, so I got to keep it up and keep checking it. And I got a compliment on the post I have up on Jill Biden. Someone, subscriber, said that she laughed a lot. So there's some funny lines in there. So
it was a good one.
And I do think that if the misdiagnose a stroke and a cold, you should no longer be called doctor. So
absolutely. Have a good weekend, David.
All right, you too. And thanks everybody for watching. And we'll see you next Friday. Have a good night.